Hello and welcome back to the Future Edit. I have Hedy from Nymph of Neptune back with me this week, which I'm super excited about. Now, she was on the podcast the first season, and we are talking about astrology overall and what she does. But now she's concentrating on relationship astrology, which I find absolutely fascinating. I don't know much about it, so this is going to be a super amazing lesson for me. So thank you, Hedy, for being here. And she's also in Mexico right now, which is super amazing. And I'm very jealous because it's warm there.
Thanks for having me. Hi.
Hi. So let's start off with you explaining what is relationship astrology.
So relationship astrology is where you look at the interaction between two charts of two people. And it doesn't have to be romantic. Obviously, you can do this for business partners, for best friends, even for a boss and an employee relationship. So it is looking at how, you know, when you meet someone and they bring out something in you that maybe was lying dormant, or they trigger you in some way. Okay. Or even if you think about it on a sort of very basic, superficial social level, like when you go to something and there's someone there that you're very intrigued by, and there's a connection and there's chemistry. And I'm at the point now where I can always pick up on it and sort of know when there's, you know, some planetary chemistry between me and a person I'm meeting. And sometimes you can, if you get really into it, you can start to maybe identify what planet they are triggering. So if we think about planetary archetypes, so for example, if someone is triggering your Venus, they might make you feel beautiful or admired or attractive. If someone is triggering your Jupiter, it's interesting because it can bring out qualities in you that maybe you would never consider you had. So to give you an example, it's like if you don't consider yourself someone that's maybe a coach or a cheerleader or supportive or kind of the mom or the dad figure for someone else, like maybe you've always been the one that's looked after, or quite self-contained. But then you meet someone and you notice how for them, you are a source of encouragement. For that, they look to you to be that kind of mentor figure or that teacher or kind of that, you know, elder kind of, you know, nurturing figure towards them. And they can start to awaken, different sides of your persona, which is cool.
That's really cool. So for instance, like you have your best friend group. Clearly, they're your best friends because your charts somehow mesh together, or their planets. It's all complementary then to you, correct?
Yep. And then, you know, I think my therapist once said to me that, you know, 3 is a very awkward number. So I think then once, if you're in a group of 3, let's say you do a trip together, then you can suddenly start to notice where you don't complement each other, you know? And also that's quite interesting is that obviously if you spend enough time with some people, then you can see how certain planetary transits or times of the year, you know, you're not going to think about that, but it's just interesting how maybe, you know, January to May, everything was great, everything was going well. And then why is it that every October we argue like, you know, like,
else? That's interesting. And when it comes to, let's say, relationships or friendships, and you're looking at someone's chart, why is it then that at one point you were super close and then all of a sudden it's like they ghosted you, or they've just basically left?
So that can definitely happen, and it can happen with planets that would indicate, you know, restriction or a limitation or a cutting away. So a Mars transit would, even though we think of Mars as being a fiery planet that invigorates, it also cuts. It's separation. You know, Venus is togetherness and Mars is separation. So, you know, sometimes it can be that if a Mars transit happens, but Mars transits are short. You know, Mars transits that can indicate kind of like a flare up. That can indicate like a huge argument that is so explosive it maybe threatens the relationship, which I've definitely experienced when I was going through a Mars. Let's say the Mars transit triggered the moon. You know, the moon in the relationship chart between two people is the desire for peace and for emotional understanding. So then if a Mars transit comes along, it can totally threaten that. Luckily, it's quick. But what happens if you have a Saturn transit, which lasts for 2.5 years? So if Saturn is crossing over, or aspecting the moon or the Venus, Saturn can also, it has a positive side. It can be stabilizing. It can, push a couple to make the next steps, because Saturn wants structure and stability and something strong, so, joint bank accounts or buying a house or whatever, getting serious. But maybe there are, when does the affair happen? Is that a Uranus transit? Uranus is, the back door was left open and it's unexpected because Uranus shakes things up and creates chaos. So I think it also can help us to not, I really think it can help some couples not take things so personally. Like that it actually, maybe the affair is just, life's expression of a deep astrological transit that would pass. And then you ask yourself, what is this trying to tell us? Have I fallen asleep at the wheel?
That's really interesting, because then my question is, you have so many couples that have the 7-year itch. Is there usually some kind of planet or transit that happens then at that point, Saturn. That 7 years?
Saturn it has a 7-year, because it reaches its like quarter phase every 7 years.
That's super interesting. I mean,
I actually haven't heard about the 7-year itch, to be honest.
Really?
I know about the 7-year cycle in life.
Yeah.
In the spiritual world, 7, a big closing cycle. Once you reach the 7th year of something, then maybe, after that you finally move on from something, or But
the 7-year itch, when, before I got married, it was always like, watch out for the 7-year itch. And that's usually when affairs happen. People get super bored of each other. If you make it to 7 years in marriage, usually you're pretty good to go. And if you can get over that hump, which is silly because people can be together 45 years and they still decide that they're not right for each other at that point. Right. So when it comes to relationships, when you are looking at their charts, tell me about how you're reading their charts. And do you find that there's some planets that, let's say someone's about to get married and they come to you and they're saying, okay, is this a good idea? What is your process and how do you walk them through it? Because I'm sure they're pretty nervous when you read their charts, no?
Well, so I've never had that. I've never had someone say, we're about to get married, can you confirm? Or I don't know anyone who has the courage to, I don't know.
Okay, fine.
If you've already got the engagement ring on your finger. I have encountered it more organically with my, in solo sessions with my female clients, and they're speaking about something. And I can, just from their words, what they're telling me, I will start to think of planets that I'm like, this sounds like a Saturn-Mars compatibility thing, not a transit. This sounds like his Mars sits on your moon. It sounds like his Saturn sits on your Venus,
Yeah.
So examples of that are, everything in the relationship is great. We're so compatible, but when I have strong emotions about something, he shuts the door or he just puts a wall up. And that for me is a Saturn. That sounds like Saturn. You can always hear it in the words. And then I look and it's like, okay, his Saturn is on your moon. And the moon wants to be, the moon is maternal urges, it's our emotions, but it's also, our inner child. It's just the moon is just our raw emotions. And so if we have these strong feelings, and the moon is watery, and Saturn just sort of doesn't stand for it and just sort of puts a wall up and just stands firm and is quite cold, very, very cold.
Yeah.
And I can see it in the look on their faces, almost their disbelief. They look at me and they say, and they almost say, it's like I'm dealing with a different person when this happens. When I have this emotional flare up, I'm almost left speechless because I'm like, what is this I'm encountering? And I'm like, well, you're encountering Saturn,
Yeah. And are there certain planets then so what are the planets you look at? Are there main planets you look at when you're comparing charts and seeing how they overlap, or do they all play a very important part?
Yeah, honestly, I look at everything. I think also based on the specific, I kind of zoom in like a laser focused way, according to what the person is telling me. So for example, the emotional and then the cold, I'm like, that sounds like a moon and a Saturn. So then I will look for it, or I'll kind of hone in on it. Yeah. But, Saturn in relationships is also really important, that your Saturns work together in the right houses. So there's a very traditional book, which I forgot the name of, but the original sort of textbook of relationship astrology says that if you have Saturn as a couple, so this is in your composite chart, if you have Saturn on the IC, so the base, which is like the roots of the chart, of the relationship chart, or on the marriage line, on the relationship line, which are kind of like, the sort of 6 p.m., the four corners of the chart.
Okay.
That it's very tough for that to go the distance if Saturn is there.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
That Saturn should be in a place where the stabilizing effects are good, so maybe you're a couple, but you also want to have a joint business, or you have similar goals. That's I think Mars is also Mars is obviously sex. So that's something that's interesting if I hear things about sexuality coming up.
Yeah.
It's like someone can feel very, very sexual and sensual their whole life, and then they end up with someone who actually sort of puts like a restriction on their sense of fluid sexuality. So how do you navigate that? And then positive things, like someone who maybe has never really valued being a homemaker or making a sort of cozy home nest and being sort of maternal. And then they meet this person and all of those urges rise to the surface. And that's probably because the other person's, depends which planets, maybe it's a moon contact, right? The other person's moon, home, the urge for home, to nest, to root, is connecting with the other person's moon in such a harmonious way that it creates that kind of womb space that's harmonious for home.
That's so interesting, because I think for women, especially when we get in a relationship, a romantic relationship, how when you start to change a bit and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm feeling a little broody, or I'm this and this and this. It's like, well, actually, maybe it is that your chart in comparison, combined with your partner's, is bringing that about, which then can completely clarify so many things that's going on, right? Where you might not feel that way with a different partner, and how it's okay to accept that, and it gives you permission to feel that way as well, I would presume.
Yeah. And also I think kind of validates the idea of some people are right for you and some people just really will not make you feel good. That the idea of it's not a good match is really a thing. Yeah. That there are certain people, compatibility is so important. And because I think sometimes when people enter into relationships where they feel like they're, not a good person, or they're not valued, or they can't be themselves, I think it can really distort your sense of self if you stay in it long enough. Yeah. To think there's something wrong with you. And it's like, actually, no, this person just doesn't trigger or bring out your best qualities. Let's see what happens if we switch the person and suddenly you're your best self and suddenly all of these qualities are blooming.
That's really powerful though. It's getting an individual to get to that point, right? Or to be curious about how you interact when it comes to astrology, because this for me, I think there are many different people that could be right for you. It's just whether or not, you find that person and compatible skywise and stuff. But so what happens then, let's say you're in a relationship, things are going well, and then you fall out of love and then it's not going well. Again, is that a transit, or is that just because people change, right? Their life experiences change, but do you find that is the planets moving around? And explain this to me.
Oh, that's a big question.
Yeah, I know.
If I'm honest, I think everything can be explained by astrology, really, absolutely everything. And so, yes, and I think that there are definitely couples whose astrology compatibility is such that they can go through the Saturn transits and the hurdles and the breaks and reinvent themselves. So maybe that looks like a Venus Uranus, those couples that have been, they've been through everything together, and yet they still find the gold. They still find springtime.
Yeah.
Over and over again. And I think that is something that's maybe indicated by the, like, whether you have the really harsh alignments or not. So if you have that Saturn on the 7th or that Saturn on the IC, you could happily be together for 1.5 years, 2 years, but then you're going to eventually feel that Saturn on the 7th, Saturn on the IC, and it's going to be a break.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that, if your planets are, you know, in a fertile ground, you know, you can withstand challenges better than other people.
Yeah.
And find some gold, find some fertile soil again.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. Now, what about like parent-child? I find this super interesting.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I'll try and do this without giving too many personal references, because that's the one that I know. I haven't. I've done it before with some clients. Especially, I think it can be so useful with mothers who want to understand. I think the smartest mothers, they want to understand from a detached, objective way. Yeah. What do I represent for my child? Or not, what do I want to give? What do I want to give them? What do I want to be? Yeah. Do I want to be super mom? Do I want to be, strong? What do I represent for them as chosen by the stars? Because you can see that. You can see whether someone, because I think sometimes we want something that maybe isn't natural, right? Yeah. And we just have to accept maybe more what our role is. And I think that can be kind of devastating. When I was originally studying relationship astrology, the parent-child stuff is really hard to swallow, because it makes you think, realize that in a couple who have a child, there can be one parent whose astrology is so much more compatible with that child than the other parent. Yeah. And how hard a pill is that to swallow, that the other person just has better, better foundational dynamics. Yeah. On a psychological, emotional level with the child. Yeah. And that me and this child, we're going to have to work through some stuff. But then my child, it's a bit like, essentially, I didn't choose their charts. It's a bit like, you choose your friends, but you can, if it's not compatible with someone, you can fire your employee. If you're not compatible with a friend, you don't have to be friends with them. If you're not compatible with your child, you got to work through that. Yeah. And I think it takes a lot of patience and understanding and needing to look at the other person's astrology or the child's astrology. And really, sort of objectively encourage that unique expression. Yeah, I would have loved for my mother to do ours, just because we've had such a rocky relationship for so long. It's quite interesting because, I think any mother. I mean, I'm quite interested in how my chart relates to my child's. I mean, we get on really well. And, there might be a point when she's a teenager, you go through those rough teenage years, but how I could then be of service to her. Okay, her chart's like this, meaning she probably needs more of this, this, and this in the future. And how you can really then learn to complement that instead of fighting against it. Because I think a lot of times we think that they're just being rebellious or being a certain way, but actually it's them as a person and their planets. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's the parent aspect with the kids is really interesting, I think. Because I think from an astrologer's point of view, if I look at the child's chart and I see, for example, that the child's Mars, right, which is conflict, kind of aggravation, right, it's a fiery planet. If the Mars is on the mother's moon, Mars is anger, conflict, aggravation. The moon wants to hold, to nurture, to soothe. It wants peace. Yeah. So if you have that, it can be, sort of jarring for the mother, and it's like who's triggering who, and it kind of becomes this complicated web that sometimes I think is just kind of like a destined point that maybe lots of therapy is needed to find a resolution, because otherwise it will just be that I gave birth to this human, and I just find that when they're around me, I feel aggravated. I feel more peaceful when they're not around. Which is such a
it's such a sad thing, isn't it? Because, but this is what's really good then, because then you can use this as, all right, we can go get help. We can try to figure this out. We don't have to just leave this and say, okay, we're just not going to get along. Well, how can we get along? How can you be less aggravating for me? Or
I think also, or like matching the dynamics, because a lot of it can be not conscious, but it can feel like a power play. Like if there's someone who's a bit more submissive, and there's another, maybe it's the mother or the child, the one who feels like they're always being attacked, or feels like they're being aggravated, or like they're on the receiving end of the conflict or the harshness, that they kind of have to, maybe it's a lesson to ramp up their fiery qualities and ramp up their strength and kind of match and sort of, because it's just like projection. It's a bit like the woman who attracts the abusive man because she's not owning her own strong masculine self. Yeah. And so that's kind of pushing her into a corner until she finally pushes back and actually then embodies her own, violent, masculine, kind of aggressive self, which is healthy. But if she's been lying, if she's been suppressing it for so long, along comes that figure who's here. Yeah. I think the same thing can happen with parent-child dynamics.
Wow. That's like, I find that really mind-blowing, because it's like everyone needs to get their birth chart read so they can compare it, because then you'd have like a healthier relationships. People would be walking around not internalizing like, my mother hates me, or my dad and I didn't get along, and then because the mother or the daughter dad relationship was quite toxic, then they go on to have another toxic relationship, so many could be smoothed out a bit if they knew the dynamics between personalities and how you can work together to not have that conflict. It's such a powerful thing, the sky. I'm just absolutely amazed. I need to get because now I'm gonna have to get my whole family's charts read.
And you can do family astrology. It's super interesting when you see patterns, even patterns through the generations, or uncles and aunts, and there's crossovers, and it kind of creates this family tree. But through astrology, a tree is not really the best example, more like a diamond shape, where everything kind of interconnects. Yeah. Because then it's like these Liz Green, sort of the mother of astrology, modern psychodynamic astrology, she calls them, a diamond. Like there's a family diamond. There's the soul of the family, which is expressed through different figures in the family in different ways. But ultimately, if you look, you're like, oh, we have 80% Leo in the family. There's so much Leo here. There's so much Scorpio in this family. What's the consistent archetype?
Wow. And that probably leads to, as well, if you have these family dynamics over the generation, then once you realize this, you could probably do a lot of energy clearing and clearing out a lot of things that have also been playing up in the family for so long, if you know these dynamics as well, because it all kind of goes hand in hand, right? With that. Yeah. Wow. That's super, super interesting. I'm still gathering my thoughts because I'm like, all of this is so... it's like mind blowing for me. It's like, it's out there, but for someone that is learning about astrology, all of this, I just find it just makes so much sense though, why you wouldn't want to dive deeper into this. And so you also work with then a lot of businesses or people that are trying to hire people on, or also you were saying to me earlier about your business can have its own birth chart. How does that work?
Yeah. So the name, also from a numerology perspective, I'm not a numerologist, but that's also something to consider, right? Like the name you chose for your business, what number does that resonate? And then, yes. So if you are starting something up with a business partner or a friend, you don't just look at how, what do you trigger in each other? What roles do you each play, which is also really useful, right? Yeah. So to really kind of solidify your understanding of what am I bringing to the table with my archetypes, my energy, and what is your role? Yes. And then, yes, the business itself or the entity itself has its own birth chart. Just like if you imagine you're giving birth to a child that has a birth chart, the business is itself an entity So it has its own astrology.
Yeah.
And another, yeah, this is a side note, but for another time, but nations as well. So countries have their own birth chart and astrology.
It's interesting because if you're starting up a business, you have your birth chart, and then you can do your birth chart with that business that you're dreaming up. And then you can see the dynamic, or see kind of where you might, sway or falter a bit. So you know where to put your concentration. And then if you're thinking about hiring someone or going into business, and with how that energy is all going to work together, and what's beneficial and what's not. That's really interesting. I think business partners, I don't know how many people go into business together and then a few years later they realize, that's not working.
Yeah.
Because they haven't also honored that person's archetype or what they're good at, or, they haven't also defined roles, right? And this probably really helps people define their role.
Totally.
In this.
Yeah.
Wow.
Define their role. And also, I think with employees. So with, if you're employing people, I think it's so important to understand why they work the way they do. Especially as we finally, I think, decades late, evolve out of this rigid working structure of all going to the office. If you are, I can't work in an office with a big team of people. And I'm always amazed when I see offices where it's open plan, and what about the empaths? What about the hypersensitive people who are picking up on the energy around them, all the noises? That's why I have to work in isolation. Yeah. And, you have, I do workshops with, teams to help each of the employees understand why their teammates work a certain way. Why does that person needs to work from home 3 days a week, because they have their moon in the 12th, which means that they need to sort of work in a bubble. Yeah. That person needs to talk their ideas out because they have their moon in Gemini. If you have your moon in Gemini or their Mercury in Gemini, their understanding of ideas and the way it comes from speaking it out. So they need to go and have, their 2-hour lunch chit-chatting things over isn't slacking. It's just the way they process ideas,
Yeah. And when it comes to any kind of relationship astrology, are you also looking at the astrology for the year and how that would impact what's going on within that relationship as well?
You can. That's advanced. Yeah, for sure. You can see it as, the composite chart. Your progressed chart is as a couple is really key. Progressions is a whole other ball game, but there's so many levels to it. But yeah, you can definitely look at, especially for next steps like engagement or marriage, you would look at, when are the outer planets going to sort of click into the relationship's seventh house of relationship, to solidify that.
Okay. Interesting. It is quite complex because it's just layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, isn't it? And most people probably just need that base at first to kind of figure out what's going on, and then they can progress.
Yeah.
And for you then, when it comes to all your relationships, are you always looking at the charts then to see how it all works, or are you also sometimes surprised?
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm always curious. Yeah, if I notice a dynamic, if I meet a friend or a new person who sort of triggers my creativity in some way, something that's been very dormant, or I just notice that they make me feel. I'm always curious. Someone makes you feel really good. Yeah, and if you feel seen, if you feel understood, it's usually because of the personal planets. The Mercury is a good aspect. The Venus, the moon, Mercury is understanding, communication. Or when I notice very, obviously as well, when I'm speaking clearly how I would to anyone else who understands me, and I need to repeat it 3 times to this person, or they just don't understand me. And then I'm like, this has to be a Neptune aspect or something. Like my Mercury, my communication is falling into Neptune, which is, oceans of chaos and confusion, and it just gets swept up. And then I'm like, but we just spoke about this, but they still don't, it's like, you just.
That's frustrating.
Yeah.
I would just walk away. I'd be like, okay, I can't do this anymore.
And with my clients as well, right? Like I can easily see why I am their astrologer or why I am their healer, because there's a moon Mercury contact. So their Mercury, which is the way their mind works, the way they process information, my moon maybe sits on their Mercury. So I am the holder. I am catching everything that comes out of their mind, and I'm holding it, and I'm making it look safe and fine, you know?
Yeah. I mean, now I'm just going to sit down and look at all my friends. Like, why do I feel this way with you? And, you know, but it is interesting because then you know, for me personally, you have some friends that you get on with, but then you start to kind of feel like, do I really get on with them? Am I as close as I thought I was? And you can, you know, comparing their charts, you start to see, well, we're probably close in this aspect of working together. But when it comes to a personal relationship, maybe it's not as, we don't have as much to say, or I wouldn't share my deepest, darkest secrets with you, you know, kind of thing, which I find. So clearly, I mean, there's a person for all those aspects in your chart. Interesting. Very, very interesting. And I had a question. I just lost it. Apologies. It was a good one too. You know, when like you're thinking you're going through and you're like, but I want to ask this and I want to ask this, and I just lost it. Never mind. Okay. Wow. Very interesting. And so then, are you thinking about giving a course on relationship astrology, of how people could
definitely giving a course? I think also doing couples sessions as well.
Okay.
Where each member, I did one sort of casually for two friends of mine who were together a few weeks ago, and I think that's definitely maybe the future of my practice, helping couples see each other's blind spots. And sort of also my role is to really illuminate and accentuate the positive, or not even accentuate anything, just sort of very objectively lay out exactly what they are triggering in each other.
Interesting.
So I think then maybe in their mind, if they've had an argument, if there's something that went wrong or that, you know, I don't know about, but then they hear me objectively say something, it might help them get a different angle to what the argument, or, you know, the block or the issue or whatever it is.
I mean, it's basically astrology therapy. Yeah. I mean, it's brilliant.
Astrology couple therapy. Yeah.
I mean, that could just change the dynamic between two people massively. You can save relationships this way. It's quite incredible.
I think it's about recognizing stuff. Yeah. How do you face it? If you recognize that, yes, maybe he's cold and he's tough, but he's stabilizing your moon. So it's almost like the same. It's frustrating as well. Astrology is destiny, and you know, is frustrating if you believe in it the way I do. But you know, it's like his Saturn on your moon is going to frustrate and put a cold block on your emotional outbursts. But it's going to that's also what enables you to buy a home together. Because the Saturn moon, without that Saturn moon, you might not be able to have such a stable, you know, structured home life together.
Yeah.
But there's always, it helps you to see kind of naming the negative stuff, naming the pain.
Yeah.
And how the painful experience for one or both partners, and then also showing them what it gives them at the same time.
Wow. And do you recommend then doing, I mean, when you're doing the couple sessions, do you do it via video, and would you have them both there, or would you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, I think so. Because then they hear it both in real time at the same time, you know?
Yes. Yeah. And that's quite powerful. I think most couples need to hear that coming, because it's not just, you know, they're not hearing just one side of the story. They're hearing, okay, the whole rounded story, which is quite, very nice. Interesting. Yeah. This is all really, really incredible stuff. I'm going to have you book a time for you to do me and my husband. That would be amazing.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Because I think, I mean, especially I think for couples that have gone through a lot of change and they've moved around, they've had kids, they've been, you know, we've been married for almost 14 years. and you're changing as a person, it's nice to see the dynamic within your relationship as well. Of I may be changing in a certain way and he's not changing in that way. And how can we complement each other? Or like you said, it's that awareness of the other person, you know, how do you deal with their issues?
I think for me also, for example, I think if I knew when my man was going to go through a really strong Uranus opposition, right? Yeah. The age of 42, or when I knew Saturn was going to square all of his stuff.
Yeah.
You know, so that I think that gives me an added advantage, because I would, if I didn't have the astrology knowledge, if I wasn't an astrologer, I might just think, oh my goodness, have I made a mistake? What have I signed up to? Who is this person?
Yeah.
But if I can see the archetype, I have I guess, I have an extra weapon, because an extra tool that I can see, you know, I can see the underside of it. So I'm like, okay, this is his Saturn transit. This is, you know, it's going to take a couple of years, and then let's see how this plays out. But at least I think it allows me to give more of a wide berth.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think maybe also for me, I would have to, if I knew my astrology well, even if I was one of my clients seeing me for astrology sessions, I would hope that, you know, you may as well use the astrology information and communicate that to a partner, even if they don't believe in astrology. So you say, by the way, I'm about to enter a really intense, tough transit, and there's going to be a lot of loss or a lot of challenge, and work's going to be horrific for the next 18 months, you know? But then I'm going to come out the other side. So just bear with me, kind of thing.
Yeah, because it just helps them understand, and how that they can be a support to you. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times, you know, you're not constantly expressing your feelings all the time about things. And a lot of times one partner or other's like, I have no idea what's going on with them, because they're not communicating. But you've already said, you know, it's like, okay. It's the same, you know, when women are on their period, if the man knows that, it's her cycle now, I'm going to give her a little space. It's okay. She's just bit my head off just because she's tired and she's not feeling so great. You know, it's that communication. It's just always communication within any relationship. And this gives you the communication tools to use.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Wow. I love this. I'm really excited about you moving forward with all this, because I know you've talked about it before, but now you're really getting into it now, which is really great.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nice. And do you have, so what's your next step then for progressing the relationship astrology for you?
I think just offering couple sessions. I think just offering, you know, two people to sit down. I think, you know, I know it can be so healing and so enriching. And I hope that also, you know, like any maybe good couples counselor or therapist, that it brings them closer together. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I truly believe, I mean, I had a few friends that they were having some issues, just communication issues. They were new to the relationship, and they went to a couples therapy for like 2 hours, and it completely changed the dynamic in the relationship. Wow. And now they're working so well together because they were able to communicate in a way that the other person could understand. It's the same with, you know, with the couples astrology, right? It's her moon's here and Saturn's here, and this is why I've been hitting my head against the brick wall for the last 4 years. You know, now I know how to maneuver or communicate with you, which is pretty cool. Wow. Very nice. Any other information about couples astrology you'd like to give to us before we?
No, I think it just it's also about acceptance. I think that when, you know, we, without looking at the astrology, without looking at the charts, you know, we go out with someone, we get to know someone, we learn to love someone, and then I like the way I just said learn to love someone. Yeah. We love someone. And I'm just thinking about a past relationship where seeing their astrology, I think, helped me accept parts of their creativity, their sexual fluidity, that otherwise maybe it would have taken me longer to be totally accepting of it and almost encouraging of it. I think knowing each other's birth charts, knowing the relationship chart really helped acceptance and surrender and encouragement. So I almost in even a healing way towards each other. So if you know things in their astrology they would never tell you. So I had this past relationship where I think, and what I saw is that he would have wanted to more openly explore kind of, I don't know, cross-dressing or sexual fluidity, or being more extravagant with his creative expression, dancing, singing, get up on stage.
Yeah.
And I think that I saw the way he would respond maybe to like music videos or to things that he saw. And I think knowing his astrology and feeling into that on my side made me leave the door wide open for him and encouraging him to explore that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it makes you a better lover.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, spot on. That's really good. Ooh, so cool. Well, if you are interested in any kind of relationship astrology, I know most of us are always curious about our relationships, our lover relationships. Please get in touch with Hedy. She can give you all the information on how to book in with her. And she'll be back on again talking about more amazing astrology things. And thank you again for being here with me.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks.